You're lost, aren't you? The service entrance is in the back. Dr. Marcus Chen had it before he even turned. The voice of a woman who'd made a decision and was now simply executing it. He was standing at the edge of the ballroom with a glass of champagne, dressed in the same careful navy suit and tie that every other man in the room was wearing. His shoes polished, his posture steady. And somehow, all of it added up, in this woman's calculation, to someone who didn't belong. She was older, white, wearing a dress that cost more than his monthly rent, and she was looking at him with the kind of certainty that comes from never having been wrong about anything that mattered. "I'm actually here for the gala," Marcus said, even and plain. "Of course you are," the woman said, and her tone managed to suggest that she understood exactly what kind of here he was there for. "But this area is for donors and guests. If you need anything, the staff can help you in the back." She turned away, already reaching for her phone. That was how it started. Because what the woman didn't know, what she couldn't know. Looking at a black man in a navy suit at a charity gala in one of the most exclusive buildings in the city was that she was looking at the reason the gala existed at all. Dr. Marcus Chen was a pediatric oncologist, and he ran a clinic in the neighborhood. The wealthy people on the board of this charity liked to talk about helping, but never actually visited. He'd spent the last 15 years treating the children nobody else wanted to treat. The uninsured, the undocumented, the kids whose parents were too scared or too tired or too broke to navigate the system. And somewhere in those 15 years, the work had become known. Articles had been written. Other doctors had started reaching out. And then the board of this particular charity had approached him about partnering, about letting them fund a research initiative that would actually make a difference. And Marcus had said yes, thinking it would be just another night, just another room full of people who wanted to feel like they were doing something. He hadn't expected to be invisible in his own honor. The woman, whose name was probably on the charity board, though Marcus didn't know and had never bothered to learn, had made 2 phone calls to security. And both times the security guards had come over and assessed the situation and then, in perfect coordination, had done absolutely nothing. They'd looked at Marcus, they'd looked at the woman, and they'd walked away without a word. Because the security team at this venue knew who Dr. Chen was. They'd been briefed. They knew this was the guest of honor, and they knew that no amount of certainty from a board member was going to make them remove him. But the woman didn't know that. She only knew that security had been called and had failed to act, which in her mind meant one of 2 things. Either the security was incompetent, or, and this was the thought Marcus could see crossing her face, she'd been wrong. She looked at him differently then, not with respect necessarily, but with uncertainty, which was almost worse, because uncertainty was when people got desperate to prove something. And desperate people were unpredictable. "I don't understand," she said. "If you're actually here, if you're actually supposed to be here, then why are you standing alone at the edge of the ballroom looking like you don't belong?" Marcus considered telling her, considered explaining exactly who he was and why he was there, and what the clinic did and what the partnership meant. Considered letting her know that the person she'd been certain about was someone worth taking seriously. Instead, he looked at her and said something true that had nothing to do with credentials or titles or who belonged where. "Maybe I'm just used to standing at edges," he said quiet. "Maybe I got tired of trying to take up less space than I actually do." The woman opened her mouth to respond, and then the ballroom doors opened and the host walked in. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the board chair. A woman whose family had built hospitals and schools and whose name was on buildings across the city. She saw Marcus, and her entire face changed. Dr. Morrison walked across the ballroom, not rushed, but direct, the way a woman walks when she's certain of what she's doing. And she took Marcus's hand, and she put her arm around his shoulder, and she looked at the woman who'd been trying to remove him, and she said, with the particular coldness that comes from old money discovering its assumptions were wrong. Margaret. This is Dr. Marcus Chen. He's our keynote speaker. The entire evening has been arranged in his honor, a pause that was exactly the right length. I wonder if you've actually read any of the materials we sent out about tonight. Margaret's face went through several colors. Marcus felt almost sorry for her, in the way you can feel sorry for someone even when they've spent the last 20 minutes trying to humiliate you. Because what she was experiencing was the particular shame of public correction, and it was absolute. But Dr. Morrison wasn't done. She took Marcus's arm and walked him to the center of the ballroom, and 300 people turned to watch. People who'd been making small talk, people who'd been checking their phones, people who'd been doing what wealthy people do at charity galas, which was the minimum necessary to feel like they were helping. And Dr. Morrison raised a hand and the room went quiet. Everyone, she said, this is Dr. Marcus Chen. For the last 15 years, he has been running a pediatric oncology clinic in the Highland neighborhood, treating patients nobody else would touch. He's trained 12 new physicians. He's established a research protocol that's now being used in hospitals across the country. And tonight, we're announcing a 5-year, $20 million partnership to expand his work. She paused. She let that number sit. She let people understand that this wasn't token charity. This wasn't performative generosity. This was real money, real investment, real belief in what one man had built in a neighborhood the board usually only talked about. Dr. Chen, she said, I'd like you to tell them about the work. And she handed him the microphone. Marcus stood there a moment, aware of 300 pairs of eyes, aware of Margaret watching from her corner with her phone still in her hand, aware of the particular geometry of the room and how it had shifted, how he'd gone, in the space of 3 minutes, from being invisible at the edge to being central, from being someone the room was uncertain about to being someone the room was hanging on every word of. He could have made it about Margaret. He could have used the platform to humiliate her the way she'd tried to humiliate him. He could have made the evening about her mistake. He didn't. He looked out at the room and he started talking about the children, about the ones who came in with diagnoses that broke your heart, from families that had no safety net, from neighborhoods that nobody invested in, about the work of staying, of showing up, of building something that mattered when the world had already decided those children weren't worth saving. And he talked about what the partnership meant, not in numbers, but in lives, in the fact that now he could take on more patients, now he could train more doctors, now the work could scale without breaking the people doing it. He talked about the people who'd helped him, the allies he'd found, the community that had stood with him. And he talked about the people who'd looked at him and seen a problem instead of a person, and how that had taught him that the work itself had to be the answer, had to be the thing that proved who he was, because no amount of explaining would change the mind of someone who'd already decided. The room was silent when he finished, not the polite silence of a fundraiser that's gone well, the silence of people who'd been moved by something they didn't expect to be moved by. And then they stood. All of them, 300 people in an exclusive ballroom, standing for a man they'd almost let be removed by a woman who was certain she was right. The reckoning Margaret approached him after, when the crowd had dispersed and he was talking to Dr. Morrison about the logistics of the partnership. She looked smaller somehow, or maybe Marcus was just seeing her clearly now, not as a threat or an obstacle, but as a person who'd made a mistake and was now carrying the weight of it. Dr. Chen, she said, I owe you an apology. Marcus turned. You made an assumption, he said. Most people do. The difference is you acted on it. I was wrong. Yes, Marcus said. He wasn't going to soften it for her. You were. But being wrong isn't the sin. Acting on the wrong assumption without asking first, That's the sin. You could have asked my name. You could have asked what I was doing here. Instead, you decided. Margaret nodded. She looked like she was about to leave, and then she turned back. What can I do to fix it? Read the materials, Marcus said. About tonight. About who's in the room. Actually read them, not just glance at them. Care enough to know who the people around you are before you decide where they belong. He looked at her. And the next time you're certain about something, ask first. She left, and Marcus wasn't sure whether she'd actually change, whether this would stick, whether people like Margaret, people with power and certainty in equal measure, were capable of the kind of humility the moment had demanded. But that wasn't his responsibility. He'd done what he could. He'd shown her, in front of 300 people, what it cost to be wrong, and he'd made clear what being right actually meant. The quarter 6 months later, Margaret sat on the board of the newly expanded clinic. Not because she was passionate about the work, Marcus doubted she would ever be passionate about it in the way that mattered, but because she'd understood, that night, that she'd been asked to be part of something and had tried to exclude the person leading it, and the only way to live with that was to actually commit to the work. She wasn't a perfect ally. She still sometimes slipped into the tone of someone doing charity instead of someone fighting for justice. But she showed up. She read the materials. She asked questions first. And Marcus, when people asked him about her, about whether he forgave her, would say something that had nothing to do with forgiveness and everything to do with understanding. A person who's been certain their whole life and then has to face being wrong, that's a different kind of work than any of us do. If she can do that work, if she can sit with the discomfort of having made a mistake in front of the whole city, then maybe that's the point. Maybe that's how change actually happens. Not through rage, but through the slow, grinding work of making people understand what their certainty costs. The gala became a yearly event, and it became famous in the city, not for what happened that first night, though everyone knew the story, but for what it raised, what it built, what it made possible. And Marcus Chen, who had spent 15 years standing at the edge of rooms, had learned that sometimes the edge was where you saw things clearly, and sometimes being pulled to the center was just another kind of visibility, and the only thing that mattered was whether the visibility actually changed anything. It did. The work expanded. The children got treated. The research moved forward. And a woman who'd tried to remove him from his own honor ended up helping to build the thing that honor was actually for, which was its own kind of justice, not the justice of humiliation, but the justice of transformation, slow and grinding and real. If you've ever been dismissed by someone certain of who you were and watched them realize they were wrong in front of the whole room, tell us about it in the comments. We read every one. The moral is as sharp as the moment Dr. Morrison walked across that ballroom. Certainty without curiosity is the most dangerous thing in a room. And the people who make assumptions before they ask questions are the ones who need most to be shown what their assumptions cost. But transformation is possible, even for people like Margaret, if they are willing to do the work. Tell us where you're listening from tonight, and about the moment you were dismissed and then proven right. If Marcus's night meant something to you, share it with someone who's been told they don't belong in a room where they absolutely do. And wherever you're standing, at an edge or at a center, may you have the composure to let your work speak. May the people who are wrong find a way to make it right. And may you never have to shout to be heard, because the truth of what you do will speak louder than anyone's certainty ever could.